Emperor Joker returning is like the least interesting thing that happens in this comic, if that gives you any indication of how dope this comic is. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with DC KO! And this is round 3. Trace. So what this does is this picks up and it says, in the split second before the next round begins, Clark hears screaming, the screaming of children. His muscles tense, but then he realizes these children are not screaming with fear or pain, but with joy. The world they live in is peaceful and safe and thriving. Is it Earth? It is, he sees, but somehow it's also him. Superman, he's in every particle, every atom, and then he understands. This is the vision, the one he had on the way into the tournament. This is the universe as it could be if he wins. The universe bent towards him, shaped by him. If he takes the crown, if he destroys Darkseid and keeps the crown, a place where people live in harmony, a shiny, symphonic civilization, brave and hopeful, reaching out, hands open. He wants to look away, but he can't. The beauty is too much. And so in that moment, he snapped out of it because the heart says, which is when I rip it away. And so that's where Lex shows up, right? Good dreams, Superman. And he's like, me, I had an amazing one. And that's when the remaining contestants start teleporting in. And the statement's made, the rest arrive then, ripped from their own visions, a techno-utopia, a universe aglow with truth, a black laughing void, a grand sculpture of will, a dark wonder, and a kingdom of peace. And so Superman asks the question, are we all that's left? And that's where Wonder Woman says, it seems that way, right? Because keep in mind, we got round 2, then we got the one-on-one fights, which technically the one-on-one fights were part of round 2, but still, that's when the heart says, welcome champions to the 3rd round of the tournament. In pursuit of victory, Darkseid occasionally allied himself with unexpected beings. So for this battle, you will fight in teams. Each of you must choose a partner. And that's where Wonder Woman asks, right? From where? Among ourselves? And the heart says, no. From among them, the fallen champions. There is one of you, though, who has generated more Omega energy than the rest. And so we'll get to choose a partner from all realms of reality. And that champion is the Joker, which is kind of crazy to believe that the Joker has generated the most amount of energy necessary to channel the Heart of Apokolips and to take enough power to defeat Darkseid. But that's where Joker's just like, I love this game. And Cyborg's just like, you gotta be kidding me, right? But again, the heart continues on. For the rest, the choice stands before you. You can choose a former foe or a former ally. You can choose for wisdom, strength, or chaos, but choose quickly or the choice will be made for you. And so that's where the heart says, Clark is the last to decide. I am just about to choose for him when he takes his partner. And so that's when it says, fresh off of a brutal round of one-on-one battles, all fights to the death, the victors emerge into this, the next challenge. And that's where we get the pairings, right? Superman and Shazam against Guy Gardner and Hal Jordan, which, by the way, good catch. Don't know how I missed it. That is not Time Displaced Guy Gardner. Time Displaced Guy Gardner is on the Justice League Unlimited team. But the second battle, Aquaman and Hawkman versus Lex Luthor and Supergirl, Cyborg and Connor Hawke against Wonder Woman and Big Barda, and finally, Zatanna and John Constantine against the Joker and a mystery character, because we don't know the person he's chosen from across all realms. Lest we forget, the absolute universe is a part of all of this. And so what goes on here is you initially switch over to Arena 1, right, where you have Guy and Hal and Clark and Shazam. And that's where Guy just says, I know what you're thinking. Yes, there were way better choices. More powerful, smarter, handsomer. But me, I always choose my friends. And that's where Hal is like, I'm touched, right? Because Guy Gardner certainly respects Hal Jordan. In fact, Hal Jordan is arguably the greatest among all the Lanterns, depending on how much of a fan you are. But that's where Superman is just like, are we doing this? Are you guys going to talk the whole time? Are you guys just going to spoon the whole time? And that's where Guy's just like, no hard feelings when we kick your asses, bro. And that's where Superman's just like, of course not. But that's not going to happen, right, Billy? And Billy's like, absolutely not. And these two guys go toe-to-toe against Guy Gardner and Hal Jordan. At that point, you switch over to Arena 2, where you have Hawkman and Aquaman. Now, the funny thing about this is these guys fought one another. And so that's where Hawkman says, right, brought me back for a rematch. And of course, Aquaman just tells him, right, like, you're a true warrior, Hal. I am honored to fight alongside you. And he says, sea and air, brother. And he just says, it's actually air and sea. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. And here's the funny thing. Lex Luthor looks at Supergirl and it's like, how sweet, how touching, right? Like, all right, Kryptonian, let's finish him. And at that point, Supergirl blasts Lex Luthor with her heat vision and is like, did you seriously think I would fight alongside you? Are you insane, right? And she's like, I want a new team up. How about it, Arthur and Carter? All of us against Lex Luthor. And that's where Carter's just like, now you're talking, right? And so all these battles are fighting headlong because at that point, you go into Arena 3, right? And it's Big Barda and Wonder Woman. And that's where Big Barda just says, right? Let us unleash the fury of the gods on these mortals. And as a bit of a refresher here, Big Barda is a former Fury of Darkseid, which is to say, she's among some of Darkseid's most powerful warriors. And Wonder Woman is arguably the most powerful warrior on Earth. There is a credible argument to be made there, especially if you ever read the League of One storyline, where she literally dismantles the Justice League by herself. She takes the team apart piece by piece, to say nothing of Tower of Babel. But still, Cyborg and Connor Hawke, right, they come together. And that's where Connor tells him, thanks for the shot, pal. And Cyborg just tells him, you're one of the deadliest fighters in the world, Connor. And now that I've just infused you with nano enhancements, they will not know what hit them. And then you finally get to Arena 4. And that's where Zatanna just says, eye on the prize, John. And John, of course, always the flirtatious, crazy, devil-may-care type guy, just says, like, it's a hell of a date that you brought me on, love. You know, and she's like, Joker, right? Who did you choose? Now, here's where it gets nuts. I told you guys, it gets crazy. Joker just says, you know me, right? I just love to laugh. So I figured, why not pick someone who loves to laugh too? And he brings in the Batman who laughs. He brings back the Batman who laughs. Now, here's the crazy thing. Joker hates Batman who laughs. For those of you guys who don't know, Joker doesn't like him. In Dark Knight's Metal #6, they met. Batman and Joker teamed up to fight the Batman who laughs. It was amazing. I feel like we should go back and remaster the Dark Knight's Metal series, right? Like, where you got all those dark multiverse versions of Batman, right? Like Red Death and Murder Machine. It was absolutely amazing, right? But that's where Zatanna and John Constantine are just like the Batman who laughs. And John Constantine's just like, I am not liking this state after all. But that's where he goes to ensnare the Joker, and then he recognizes the ruse, right? He's like, hang on, this does not smell like dark multiverse. And so that's when he says, trust me, I know a con when I see one. And that's where Joker just looks at the Batman who laughs and is like, the jig's up, old friend. And the Batman who laughs just says, the looks on their faces. And so Joker just responds and he says, I know how much you love a good trick, so let's play an old favorite, shall we? Go on now, show them who you really are. And so at that point, he just says, all right, if you insist, snaps his fingers, right? Which is an iconic moment from DC Comics. And he just says, so kids, what's better than a king? An emperor. Emperor Joker, that is. And like, Emperor Joker fully returns. Now, here's the thing. Those of you guys who don't know who Emperor Joker is, we covered that story once upon a time. Emperor Joker is cracked. Dude, this dude is so overpowered. It's a version of the Joker that has the power of Mr. Mxyzptlk, to the point where, like, he literally rewrote reality using something like 99.9% of this dude's power. It was phenomenal. It was an incredible story. It was nuts. It was batshit insane, but it was an amazing story nonetheless. And that's where Zatanna is just like, Mixopiddling. Because anyone who knows anything about Mixie knows how overpowered he is. That basically nothing's beyond this guy's ability to control. And so that's where the Joker just asks, right? Now that's funny. And he just asks, right? Come on, right? Not one to laugh? Fine. Then I will laugh for you, and casts a spell and literally attacks both Zatanna and John Constantine. So at that point, we are off to the races. The fights are literally just going in tandem, and it's amazing. Because in that moment, Wonder Woman almost does this kind of like a fastball special with Big Barda, where she literally hits her with a lasso of truth and swings her in to everybody else. Like literally Cyborg and Connor Hawk are like, did Wonder Woman just throw a god at us? Right? And that's where Big Barda is like, she did. She 100% did. And so that's the funny thing, is because Connor says, right, he tells Cyborg, I appreciate you picking me to be your partner, Cyborg, but why not pick someone stronger or with magic? And that's where Cyborg says, I will show you, right? And at that point, he actually starts to kind of merge with Connor Hawk, not like a full-on merging of bodies, but literally starts absorbing information out of him. And Connor asks him, what are you doing? And Cyborg says, like I said, you're one of the deadliest fighters in the world, but I picked you because of how you are deadly. The style of fighting that you studied, it's all about human impulse and unpredictability, right? Surprise. Perfect for going up against traditional warriors. And once I scan all of your skills and absorb them, I can fight just like you. He gets a Neo moment, right? I know Kung Fu. It's amazing, right? And so at that point, Connor's just like, and with your enhancements, I'm as strong and fast as you are. Twin Titans. And so in that moment, Cyborg is like, exactly, now let's go win this thing. Which I gotta be honest with you guys, now DC has to make a comic called Twin Titans that stars Connor Hawk and Cyborg. We need this team up. I didn't know I needed it until right now, but now I know that I do. And now we need it. So here's the crazy thing. At that point, you jump back to Joker, Zatanna, and Constantine. And that's where the Joker just says, don't you get it, right? I am trying to help you both. Magic's supposed to be fun, because one of the crazy things about Emperor Joker is that he's almost like a far more goofy and cartoonish version of the Joker in terms of how he carries himself, but regarding his level of power, it's anything but. They're literally fighting omnipotence. They might as well be fighting God for all the good that it does. And so Joker just says, I just want to see you smile. And so in turn, Zatanna, observing all of this, just says, John, those constructs that the Joker's attacking us with, and that's where Constantine says, I feel it too. They're like some kind of bloody visual neurotoxin. And that's where Zatanna picks up on what's happening here. And she says, exactly, just keep your eyes on him. But by the time she makes that statement, it's too late. John converts and he's infected with Emperor Joker's toxin. And so he says, I just thought of something really funny. So literally, he's losing himself. In that moment, you jump back to Cyborg and Wonder Woman, Connor Hawk, and Big Barda. They're holding on as best they can. And so Wonder Woman says, Barda, right, punch me as hard as you can. And Barda's just like, I thought we were on the same team. And Wonder Woman says, we are. Just do it. And so Barda punches her as hard as humanly possible. But when she does, Wonder Woman blocks the shot with her gauntlets. And that's where the heart chimes in and says, the gauntlets were forged from the Aegis. They don't just deflect blows, they amplify them. The blast could shake the heavens, or in this case, hell, and literally knocks them all out. It knocks out both Cyborg and Connor Hawk, and that's how they win. And that's where Barda just says, was this why you chose me, Diana, my strength? But Diana says no, right? You were trained in the fire pits of Apokolips. You know the way of war there. I need you to tell me everything you know about the Heart of Apokolips now. Not only that, once you jump back to Emperor Joker against Zatanna and Constantine, again, two of the most powerful magic wielders in DC Comics, the Joker just says, this has been fun, kiddo, but it's time for the curtain to fall on your act, right? And that's where he just says, look into madness. And she just says, John, I can't turn away, but it doesn't matter. She succumbs to the influence, and that is how Joker takes out both Zatanna and John Constantine. Constantine. Something to notice here, this fight was not drawn out. It ended in moments, and that's the level of power that Emperor Joker has. And so in that moment, Mixie just starts talking to him, and it says, I did what you asked, clown. I lived up to my end of the bargain. Now, send me home. And so that's where Joker just says Mixie's name backwards, and Mixie ends up teleporting back home. And at that point, we switch over to the final fight, which is still going on. Superman and Shazam versus the Green Lanterns. And so when we switch to this, right, Guy Gardner spends the whole time talking trash, right? I got your Rocket of Eternity right here. Superman apologizes, says, look, I'm sorry, Hal. I'm sorry that I have to attack you. But Hal Jordan's response, don't you dare do that, right? Omega energy. Remember, you are not my friend here. We are enemies fighting each other. Yes, we know we're friends. Our minds haven't been screwed up, but each one of us is fighting to attain the Heart of Apokolips so that we can rival Darkseid. And so in turn, Hal Jordan says, it's funny though, right? I think a lot of us figured you'd be the one to beat Clark, which is why for my one item, I brought this. And he launches a Black Mercy at Superman, right? And the heart tells us an alien parasite that nearly killed Clark once before, a baby that Hal took from Sector 2811, encased in his very will. It attaches to its host pleasure centers and plunges them into a dream, a perfect, painless vision. And just like that, Clark is off the game board. Now, for the most part, the Black Mercy plants are synonymous with the warlord Mongol, right? He uses them all the time. And as far as I know, he's the upper limit of a person that the plants have been used on, which is to say, I'm not aware that the Black Mercy plants have been used on, Darkseid before. Whether they could infect him or not, I'm not entirely sure. But the fact is, when you are hit with a Black Mercy plant, you literally fall into essentially a catatonic state, and you're left to the whims and wants of perfect dreams. But then we switch over to Lex Luthor and Supergirl. And still, Supergirl's absolutely trashing him, right? She's like, why in your wildest dreams did you think I would side with you? And that's where he just says, because of this. And then he opens up an energy plate on his chest and fires at her, which subdues her momentarily. But then this is when you find out the main motivation. Because when Hawkman and Aquaman get to her, they ask her, what's going on? And she just says, red kryptonite. It makes us rage. And she just says, cousin, I am sorry for what I am about to do. Because let me tell you something, man, Supergirl on her own is pretty capable, right? Supergirl on her own, she's a good fighter, she's strong, she can hold her own against most anybody. When Supergirl is enraged, right? Power scalers love this, right? An enraged Supergirl. When Supergirl is enraged, like a Red Lantern Supergirl, or when she's just really pissed off, her power level just skyrockets. It's absolutely nuts because any and all barriers she has, right? Mental blocks in her head, they go away. She stops pulling her punches. And so that's when you jump into the dream, essentially, of Superman when he's under the control of the Black Mercy plant, which is effectively a flashback to before the tournament started, when it was him and it was Lois and it was Batman, and they were just kind of hanging out, having a friend's night of sorts. And she just says, lost you there for a moment, right? And he just says, I was just looking for the good wine, the one that Ray made in the micro vineyard. And she's like, so you're not hiding? And he's like, no, I'm fine. And she says, when Lucy and I were little, our father never let either of us win at games. Me, I liked it. Lucy, it crushed her, but he saw it as an act of love. And she says, Bruce is like that, but he will push you to win as an act of love, even if it makes you hate him, twisted as it may sound. With you take more joy in seeing other people win, so it doesn't work, and admittedly makes for a kind of awkward game night. But she says, at least we have good wine. And so she just says, come on, Smallville, get out there and be Superman. And that's where the heart chimes in, and it says, be Superman, right? He is Superman, but something is different here in this vision. The mercy takes it further, for he realizes that in this place, he did not just fix the present. No, here, he, Superman, has fixed everything, the future, and even the past. But how? Suddenly, someone is coming through time to meet him. But who? And then they arrive. His parents, right? Jor-El and Lara. Clark has never felt such peace, never felt so whole. And so the heart says, Lois's words come back to him. Get out there and be Superman. The memory fills him with rage. Rage at Hal, at the cursed plant, at the dream, at me, at the game itself, but also at the truth, because that dream could be his reality. It could be our reality. Why shouldn't he want it all? Fix everything. Why shouldn't we want him to? With the world falling apart, the doomsday clock at midnight, don't you want him to save us all? I do. And in this moment, Clark wants it too. He wants it with the burning of 1,000 roaring suns. So literally breaks out of the influence of the Black Mercy plant through sheer will alone, which is an incredible feat. But then you switch back over to Kara, right, to Supergirl. And Supergirl's just like going absolutely haywire, attacking both Connor Hawke and Aquaman. And that's where they say, like, you have to listen to us. But Lex just says, I'm afraid that's not going to happen. I spliced red kryptonite with silver to heighten delusions, added a speck of black to cause violent disassociation, and voila, Designer K. I've quite literally transformed Supergirl into a warlord, right? She's literally just this gigantic, raging monster. And so when she like crushes Hawkman and Aquaman, Lex Luthor just says, and so men held dominion over sea and air. And so at that point, you switch back to Superman because now this is the last fight, right? And he says, Billy, I am sorry I brought you into this. And Billy just says, don't be, right? Like I said, you gave me a second chance. That's who you are. But the heart asked the question, is it though? He told himself he chose Billy to give the boy a second chance. But was there another reason? There was. And he knows it. Behind him, Hal and Guy are getting to their feet. They are about to use their rings to craft green kryptonite, synthetic, an old trick, but effective enough. Clark can sense it. He can see it coming. And so Superman just tells Billy, I also chose you because of what you can do with your powers for others. And so that's where the heart says, the boy realizes what Clark means, smiles, and says the word, Shazam. And so at that point, Superman becomes Shazam. He literally gets those powers. And that's where the heart says, power, right? Superman crackles with it. Billy Batson is one of the few heroes who can share his powers with others, as he has done with his Marvel family. Solomon's wisdom, Hercules' strength, Atlas's stamina, Zeus's power, Achilles' courage, and Mercury's speed, all added to Superman's own powers. So it's not as though they replaced them. It's not as though he replaced his traditional abilities with the power of Shazam. No, man, it's Superman with Shazam's powers. So there are two main things that come out of this. Number one, he's cracked. He's ridiculously OP. And the second thing is probably the greatest Superman suit design that I have ever seen in my life. Because what the heart says is that Darkseid chose allies who could help him win. He didn't choose allies based on who were friends. And so Superman crushes these guys. I mean, it's not even close, right? The heart says he takes them out in seconds. But as he does, he wonders, what is this place? Am I getting to him? The dark, twisted heart of Apokolips. The way I seem to get to Captain Atom. In this moment, Clark does not know, but it feels damn good to win. And so as he stands there, he looks across the way, and it just says, he sees Lex has won too, but there's something in Lex's look, something Clark isn't sure he's ever seen in those eyes before. Admiration. And here's the reason why, before we get to the end, and here's the reason why. Because Lex Luthor has always hated Superman. You could make a credible argument here in saying that what Lex is doing is manipulating Superman. Everything he's been saying and everything he's been doing has been for the purpose of goading Superman into attaining the Heart of Apokolips. We don't know, but here's the crazy thing, right? The heart says, round 3 is over. Congratulations. Only you 4 champions remain. Time for round 4. And at this point, Superman's like, round 4, like right now. And the heart says, yes, now, but not here. The penultimate round will take place here. And they're teleported away. And the heart says, on a world that belongs to the King Omega Darkseid. And so Joker just kind of looks around, right, and just says, like, nice. So the next round takes place on Apokolips, my kind of place. But Lex figures it out instantly and says, no, you idiot, this is not Apokolips. And Superman says, Lex is right, this is Earth. And so Wonder Woman asks the question, but how? Right? We were still fighting. And the heart says, it seems that you ran out of time, Diana. So yes, this is your Earth, but you are no longer its champions. They are. Now, let the true fight begin against absolute Superman, absolute Batman, and absolute Wonder Woman. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Cliffhangers. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.